All right. Here we are. Do you see me there on the screen?
Yes.
That means
It's working.
it's working. Okay. So,
Now
So
we
you
don't
can-
see your heads right now.
But you see.
okay, so moving. Let's.
Is that the way?
Bad.
They
Bad.
have to see.
Now,
Bad.
you see my head?
You
Yeah.
see the
Yeah,
light.
Beautiful.
but the people who this is for need to see his head. Right.
Yeah.
That's what it
You
is.
can see.
And they see?
And now,
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, anyway, let's begin. We will edit the video, no problem. So, last week we spent our time reading most of the first chapter of the book of Ruth. There were some parts that we didn't finish. So I want to go back to the last verses that we have read and start from there so that we don't miss the the rhythm of the text. But we are going to be focusing mainly on chapter 2 today. Mainly on chapter 2. But we will begin on the end of chapter 1. So for those who were here or those who watched the class online, we finished with this idea that the two daughters-in-law of Naomi, Orpah and Ruth, took different avenues, different ways. One decided to go back to Moab, to her family's house, to try to rebuild her life. We spent actually some time talking about the idea of not blaming Orpah. Orpah is not a villain. It's not someone who is a bad person. It's just a person who decides that her priority in life will be to rebuild a family. And for that, she needs to travel to Moab. And then we have Ruth, that after 3 times that Naomi insists, go with your family, I will not be able to give you another son. Even if I bear another son in my womb, it will take a lot of years for you to be able to marry him. Please return. She says this 3 times. We talked about the influence that it has on the conversion process. And then we have this famous quote by Ruth, where she says, do not urge me to leave, for I'm on verse 16. Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you, for wherever you go, I will go, wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you. When Naomi saw how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her, and the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. Now, before we continue, up until here we read last week. Before we continue with the text, I want to, you all have this page. This I distributed like it last week. So most of you already have it, but if there's anyone who didn't have a copy, we made more copies of the additional sources for Ruth chapter 1. Now we have here additional sources for Ruth chapter 2. And I added here something that I knew we were going to use today. I want us to spend at least 5-7 minutes discussing the myth, because it's actually a myth, that when Ruth said, wherever you go, I will go, your God is my God, actually, your people is my people, your God is my God, she converted to Judaism. The rabbis see in this credo, in this affirmation said by Ruth, the act of her conversion to Judaism. But historically, this is wrong. And I want to explain this a little bit. So, the book of Ruth, as we said, we will discuss later when it was written. We have time for that. We need to read the whole book in order to understand when the book was written. But it pretends to be telling a story that took place in the days of the judges. That's right after the conquering of the land by Joshua. On those days, not only that conversion did not exist, Judaism did not exist. Now, we cannot spend a lot of time because that would be a course on itself to discuss when did Judaism begin to exist as something we can call Judaism? For now, I think it's enough to say that on those days, on the days of the judges, and even on the days in which the book was actually written, centuries later from the time of the judges, there's no such a thing as Judaism. And by that I mean there's no existence of the religious, cultural civilization that we call Judaism. There was a Jewish people that actually they were not called the Jews, they were called the Israelites, but there was a Jewish people or a Jewish nation, a Hebrew nation, an Israelite confederation in the days of the judges. But that has nothing to do with what we know as Judaism nowadays and in the last 2,000 years. The Judaism that we know is something that you can be born on that faith, on that people, on that civilization, but that you can also choose to become one of us. And this is, I want to make this very clear. Judaism has conversion as one of its entrance gates. It always had it. It was always, since we have Judaism, we have the idea of becoming a Jew if you were not born as one. So when you hear people say, I don't believe in conversion, it's like someone who tells you, I don't believe in Shabbat, I don't believe in wedding. Conversion is part of Judaism since its inceptions. That doesn't mean that we were always as open to conversion as most conservative and reform synagogues are nowadays. There were different positions towards conversion, and we have always had in Jewish history, since these days, since the days in which the book of Ruth was written, or a little bit later, we have always had people who were more conservative, with small c, more like reluctant to receive new people, and they wanted to leave Judaism as it was without new influences, and others who were more liberal and wanted to either promote Judaism, because we have had in our history periods in which we actively promoted Judaism outside of our boundaries. We also had people who said, well, we don't promote Judaism, but if someone wants to convert, let's make it easy. So this tension that we have in our days, where you can find some rabbis and some congregations that are very, very open with converts, and some others that are almost closed, but almost. You will not find a rabbi who will tell you conversion does not exist.
Does not exist, or it's not allowed?
No, so some people are going to make it so difficult that in reality it's virtually impossible to convert with them. But it exists. So when someone says it does not exist, that person is an ignorant. It's like saying the same thing with divorce. You know, there are some Jewish communities where divorce is very popular, and there are some Jewish communities where divorce is something that happens very, very seldom. But no one can tell you that Judaism does not accept divorce as an option. It is there, it's in the books. Since the beginning of Judaism, since the rabbinic times, we have this institution of conversion. There were some rabbis who loved the idea, and there were some rabbis who were very reluctant. But Judaism always had an entrance gate for those who were not born within the tribe. Now, even though Ruth did not convert to Judaism, so we are not going to take this phrase as a conversion. Actually, we will see that Ruth will be treated along the whole book as a stranger. And if she converted, then she's not a stranger. Because if the rest of the people, when she arrives in Bethlehem, as we are going to see in a few minutes, treat her as a non-Jew, as a stranger, that means she did not convert it. Now, even though she did not convert, we need to address the fact that this verse is understood by the tradition as Ruth's formal act of conversion. So in order to do that, I want us to see some sources, some of them to understand how do we define Judaism before the existence of Judaism. Like, how do we define who is part of our tribe, group, nation, ethnicity, whatever you want to call it, before Judaism had the clear market boundaries that it has nowadays. So if you see, for example, the first source here, this is the book of Genesis. So we are talking, if we believe the biblical chronology, we are talking many thousand years ago. We see Joseph. You all know who was Joseph, right? One of the sons of Jacob. And it says, before the years of famine came, Joseph became the father of two sons, whom Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. So Joseph, the favorite son of Jacob, our forefather, married the daughter of an Egyptian priest. Not only that, but the two boys that are born out of that marriage are called Ephraim and Menashe. They are blessed by Jacob as if they were Jacob's own sons, and they become tribes in the Israelite nation. And no one seems to care about the fact that their mother is not Jewish. I say Jewish because Jewish is not an appropriate term for those ages. But still, no one seems to care that she is, and I will use a term that some people usually understand it negatively, but it's a technical term in Jewish language. She is a goy. She's a goya. And I'm not saying that means something bad. That's the definition of someone who is not Jewish. Goy means people, nation. And we use the term goy to talk about people who don't belong to our people. So the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, was the daughter of a pagan priest in Egypt, and she married Joseph, and her sons become two tribes of the Israelite nation. If you want to see another example, Genesis 46, so five chapters after this, Shimon's sons, the sons of Shimon, another son, the second son of Jacob, Yemuel, Yamin, Vehoad, Veyachin, Vetzochar, Veshaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. And again, there's no scandal here. We don't have the Torah screaming, how come the son of Jacob is marrying a Canaanite woman and having kids with her?
Did they care in those times if a woman married, a Jewish woman married a Gentile?
So that's a great question. Do we have an example of a Jewish woman marrying or kind of marrying someone outside of the tribe? Yes. Who is that? Dinah. Dinah is the daughter of Jacob. I'm sure many of you have read the book The Red Tent or have seen the Netflix show. If you have not, I encourage you to read The Red Tent. It's a wonderful book. Now, Dinah marries outside of the tribe. We are not sure if she marries, if she's raped. There's a lot of discussion there. But let's say at the end she decides to stay with Shem, the son of Hamor, which is not Jewish. And we know nothing else about Dinah after that. Why? Because the tradition on those days was that if you marry a woman that does not belong to your people, to your tribe, then that woman is de facto incorporated to your tribe the moment she marries you, because she moves in with you. And the Jewish people was limited by its geographical boundaries. Meaning if you live within the boundaries of the Jewish kingdom, then you're one of us. Unless you define yourself as a stranger because you're there for business, you're an ambassador, you're wherever you are. So, when a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman, or when an Israelite marries a non-Israelite woman, the woman comes to live with us and she becomes one of us. When an Israelite woman marries a non-Israelite man, she goes to live with him and we lose her. So it's very interesting because in our days, actually, the one who defines who is a Jew is the woman. So if a Jewish woman marries someone outside of the camp, her offspring will still be Jewish. In those days, it was the other way. What other example do we have of famous biblical people who married non-Jews?
Esther.
Esther. Okay, Esther. But in the case of Esther, we could say, because that's already the Persian Empire, we could say there is some kind of... The Bible is not that excited about the fact that Esther married King Ahasuerus. We don't... Esther is not the model of a faithful Jewish woman. At the end, she becomes the model because she saves the whole nation. But in the beginning, she goes to... she participates in a beauty contest to become the queen of Persia. That's not something the Bible is going to be very excited about. Now, I have a better example of someone who married outside of the camp, and we have no problem with that. Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, the greatest leader that our people had, married Zipporah, the daughter of Yitro, who was a Midianite priest. Again, it's not only that he married a non-Jewish woman. He married the son of the Pope of the Midianites, the daughter of the Pope, I'm sorry. So it's, and the Torah doesn't seem to care. There's no single verse in the Torah where someone says, well, isn't it wrong? Yeah, it's a shanda. No one questions the fact that the two sons of Moshe are a legitimate part of our people. No one says the kids are not going to be Jewish, oy vey, what am I going to do? This is the end. No, that doesn't exist. Now, if you keep reading the Torah and the Bible in general, you will find some verses, the third source that I bring here, you shall not intermarry with them, do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from me, to worship other gods, and the Lord's anger will blaze forth against you, and he will promptly wipe you out. And here I just want to open a question, and we will have to live with the question until we invent another class to discuss those issues. Because here we have a question that lies at the core of the interfaith weddings debate. What is the problem that we have with someone who is a Jew marrying someone who is not a Jew?
That the children are not
Okay.
going to
Now,
continue the faith.
according to this source, we have many other sources. I didn't bring all of them because it's not our topic. But according to this source, the problem that we have is that the non-Jewish part of the couple is going to attract the Jewish part to idol worshiping. So our problem is not with continuity, it's with avodah zarah, it's with idolatry. So I would say, what happens if my son dates a girl who is not Jewish, but is neither Christian nor Muslim? She is atheist. Do we have a problem? Of course we do. Don't misunderstand me. Of course there is a problem in traditional Judaism, but the problem doesn't seem to be connected to the reason that this verse, that is the only verse in the Torah that can be somehow connected to the idea of prohibiting intermarriage. The reason is not the same reason. Because according to this verse, the problem is idolatry. We don't have a problem per se with Jews marrying outside of the tribe. We have a problem with Jews living Jewish traditional practice. So what happens if my son or my daughter are already assimilated? Many of the people in our days, many of us, even if our kids tell us, I'm not going to keep kosher, I'm not going to keep Shabbat, I'm not going to go for the Passover Seder, I'm not going to go to a synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, but I'm going to marry a Jewish lady, oh, we are okay. And if it's the opposite, if someone tells us, I'm going to keep kosher, I'm going to keep Shabbat, I'm going to go to synagogue every day, I'm going to become the president of the synagogue, but I fell in love with a non-Jewish girl, we say, oh no. And it's not a joke. I'm just saying apparently the reason that the Torah gives is not the same reason that we give. Why? Because Judaism evolved. And what worried the Torah is not the same thing that worries us as Jewish parents. There are other worries that don't have to do with idol worshipping. I can tell you, I am 100% sure my son is not going to be an idol worshiper. And still, I would love for him to marry a Jew. Why? Because of other things. Because I define Judaism differently to what they define. Now, then we have the book of Ezra. I don't want to read the whole 2 or 3 paragraphs that I brought here from the book of Ezra, but let's just say that the book of Ezra is the place, the preeminent place in which we see in the Bible the idea of a Jewish leader explicitly saying to the whole nation, you should not marry a non-Jewish woman, and if you did, you should divorce her. In the book of Ezra, which I'm going to spoil you part of this, the book of Ezra is a contemporary of the days in which we believe the book of Ruth was written. In the book of Ezra, and for those of you who were here for Shavuot, you've heard me talk extensively about this. In the book of Ezra, we see already a position, it's not the only position, but we see a position within Judaism, probably a very popular opinion, that believed that we shouldn't be marrying someone outside of the camp. Now, when you define outside and inside, that means you can start defining the doors, the entrances. In order to define how do you enter, you first have to decide what's the inside. How do you define the inside and how do you define the outside? If the inside is going to be determined by living in a particular set of cities, then if you move, you become one of us. And if you don't move, and one of us moves, he ceases to be one of us. If we define Judaism as something that transcends geographies, because it's connected not only to a land, but also to a set of beliefs, to some practices, to some text, to some rituals, and to the feeling that we belong to something in common, even if we are not living in the same place, then it doesn't matter where do you live, it matters who you are and what do you do. And for that, we can create the process of conversion. Because the process of conversion, when Judaism was defined by geographical boundaries, was just moving. The moment you move, you start belonging. There were some rituals probably. Probably, for example, if a man moved, we would request from him to circumcise. Because we circumcise our males, and there's no discussion on that. We circumcise all of our males. And a Jewish woman should not have sexual intercourse with a non-circumcised man. But the moment he moves, he stops worshipping their idols, and he circumcised, he starts to become one of us. There's no conversion class, there's no Beit Din, there's no mikveh, there's no rabbis, there's no fee, there's no nothing. Now, when we start defining Judaism as something different, we have to define the process through which you become one of us differently. And that didn't exist in the days of Ruth. That's why I'm saying Ruth did not convert. But I think this is very important to highlight because, of course, you can only start defining Judaism as what I said the moment we go in exile. Because if living in the same land is the thing that keeps us together, exiles has 2 possible outcomes. Either we disappear or we reinvent ourselves. So, there are many things to continue discussing about this, but I want to continue with the text because it's beautiful. So it says, when they arrived in Bethlehem, I'm on verse 19, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" Now look at this. Naomi. We know Naomi from the beginning of the book. Naomi used to be a citizen of Bethlehem. She was married to Elimelech. They left because there was famine. No one knew anything about them because there was no email, there was no Skype. So Naomi and Elimelech left. Many years ago, we don't know how many years, but we know that the kids got married and they died, and Elimelech also died, and all this process. So we can imagine some years happened. Many years later, they return to Bethlehem. She returns to Bethlehem. And the people start, like the text says, buzzing or talking, gossiping probably about them. Now here we have something that it's going to accompany us for the rest of the book. We have the people of Bethlehem. By the people of Bethlehem, I mean we have a character that speaks on this book. It's an entity in itself that is going to play the role that the choir plays in a Greek tragedy. When you go to see the opera, there's this character, there's that character, and there's the choir. And who's the choir? The choir is the people of the town that they speak. It's not an individual, it's not one person, but it's the feeling of the city. So the people started to talk about Naomi. Oh, you remember Naomi? I'm sure each of you can identify someone like Naomi in your life. Someone that one day said, you know what, I'm moving. You don't hear about her for many years or about him for many years. And 5, 7, 10 years later, you encounter this person, he or she are back in town. And you say, wow, what happened to this man? He was handsome and now he's older, or the other way. But when you stop seeing someone for many years and you re-encounter that person after a decade, you're shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Now, life in Bethlehem kept going. And this is something I always like to think about this. I left Argentina 5 years ago. And once every other year, I go back to Buenos Aires to visit. For me, in my mind, Buenos Aires is frozen in 5 years ago. But for the people who are there, life kept going. And they had projects, and they failed, and they divorced, kids are born, people are dead. Everything happens. The fact that I was not there doesn't stop the clock there. It stopped for me. So suddenly when I go back and I see that this restaurant is not here anymore, and now they have a church in the place of the restaurant, I say, what happened here? But for the people who are there on a day-to-day basis, they don't see this change. So Naomi comes back, and everyone is talking about her. And she doesn't fit in the society that she used to fit many years ago. There's no place for her now, because she left as a newly married woman. She was the wife of an important person in Bethlehem, we can imagine, about Elimelech. She owned the land, and now she has nothing. Now she comes back without the kids, without the husband, with a Moabite daughter-in-law that no one knows. And there are some things that the text doesn't say, but we can imagine. We don't know what language they speak in Moab, but I can know for sure that they didn't speak the same thing that they spoke in Israel. Even if it was the same language, it was not the same accent. And how do we know this? Because in the book of Judges, we have evidence of 2 different tribes within the Jews speaking with a different accent. Actually, they need to identify if a person belongs or not to this tribe, and they ask him, say the word Shibolet. If he says Sibolet, okay, so he's from New Zealand. He's, if he speaks with a strange accent, then he's not one of us. So we can imagine that Ruth spoke differently, looked differently. When they were, let's think anachronically. When they went to temple, she didn't know that we all rise for Aleinu, that if you are not in mourning, you sit for Kaddish. She didn't know the social rules of the people. So Naomi now comes back with a stranger, without her husband, without money. Many years later, everyone was expecting, oh, these people who went to live there because they had this great project when we were all dying of famine. We expect them to come with a new Rolls Royce, not to come empty-handed. So it's very difficult. So all the people are talking about Naomi. So it says the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi? Azot Naomi?" I am verse the end of verse 19. We're going to begin verse 20. So the people said, "Is this Naomi? I can't believe it. I cannot recognize her." And she answers, "Do not call me Naomi," she replied. We said last week that Naomi comes from the word Naim, something nice, something beautiful. She says, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara." So Mara, she says, "I'm going to change my name. I'm not worthy of being called Naomi anymore. My name now will be Mara, for Shaddai has made my lot very bitter. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, when Shaddai has brought misfortune upon me?" So she says, you know what? The name of a person defines who the person is. I'm not Naomi anymore. You cannot call me Naomi anymore because there's nothing Naim in my life. So now my name will be Mara. Which word do we all know from the root Mara? Maror, bitter herbs. So she says, my life is bitter now, so don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. I brought last week, in the set of sources that I brought, the last source in the set from last week is from the book of Job, because there is some resemblance between what Naomi is saying now and what Job said in chapter 27 of the book of Job. Do you all know the story of Job?
Yeah.
At least the basics? Is there anyone who knows nothing about Job? Okay, so Job is a man who is very faithful, and there is the Satan challenges God and tells him, Job is very faithful because everything goes well for him. Start taking things away from him and you will see how he changes. Meaning he goes to temple because he's successful in his businesses. Make him bankrupt and you will see how he loses his faith. That's a challenge between Satan and God. So God says, okay, let's see. And Job gets sick, people in his family dies, everything starts going wrong in his life, and he remains faithful until at the end he cannot tolerate it. And the whole book, the main idea of the book is trying to analyze why sometimes bad things happen to good people. So in chapter 27, Job says, by God who has deprived me of justice, by Shaddai who has embittered my life. He uses the same word that Naomi is using. As long as there is life in me and God's breath is in my nostrils, my lips will speak no wrong, nor my tongue utter deceit. Far be it from me to say, you are right, until I die I will maintain my integrity. I persist in my righteousness and will not yield. I shall be free of reproach as long as I live. May my enemy be as the wicked, may my assailant as the wrongdoer. For what hope has the impious man when he is cut down, when God takes away his life? So this is his complaint, or his whatever he has to say after things start going wrong in his life. And the interesting thing here is the use of the word embittered and the name Shaddai for God. Mm-hmm. Apparently these two texts are talking to each other. Mm-hmm. One of these texts was written before, and the other text knows the first text, because the phrase is almost the same. Naomi says, how can call me Mara, for Shaddai has made my lot very bitter. And here he says, by Shaddai who has embittered my life. There's a clear dialogue between the two sources. So Naomi is our female version of Job. A woman who did nothing for her life to go wrong, and still things go wrong. You know, can you blame Naomi? No, you cannot blame Naomi. What did she do wrong? She just lost her 2 sons and her husband. Is it her fault? No, it's not.
No.
But still, things go wrong. Sometimes things go wrong. Now, what can we learn about Naomi when things go wrong? She doesn't give up.
Right.
She still has
She
hope.
faced it.
How do we know she still has hope? She's going back to Bethlehem. She thinks she's going to find something in Bethlehem that she doesn't have in Moab. She's looking forward to something better. And we will see that this pays off. Now, we are going to begin now chapter 2. The last verses of chapter 1 say, Thus Naomi returned from the country of Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabite. Again, she's not Jewish. Had she converted, the text wouldn't be saying Ruth the Moabite. It would say Ruth now, the new Jewish lady, the Yiddish maiden. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, look how the text works from a literary perspective. The whole chapter 1 took place in Moab. The first part in Moab, the second part on the way out from Moab towards Bethlehem, in the border. That's where Orpah decides to go back, and Ruth decides to join Naomi. And now this last verse of chapter 1, if you imagine this as a theater play, it's like, okay, now lights go off. There's a voice, like a, off voice that says, okay, and days later, they arrived in Moab. And now lights go on again, and the setting was completely changed. The barley season. So for us who read this text as if we were reading a novel, this verse serves the purpose of changing the setting. So we leave Moab, we are not there. The whole chapter 1 took place in the city of Moab, or in the land of Moab, and in the way from Moab to Bethlehem. Now lights go off, light goes on again, and now we are in Bethlehem. And when do we arrive to Bethlehem? In the time of the barley harvest. Now, what does the idea of the barley harvest transmit to us? The famine is over. Excellent. The famine is over. There's harvest. If there is harvest, that means there's no
food.
Yeah, there's food. There's no famine anymore. What else? There's life. The sign of chapter 1 was death. Everyone dies in chapter 1, and in the last verse we start seeing the harvest. The trees are blooming. Something is, it's springtime. Something is being renewed. Something is going to reborn again. And it's beautiful because these simple words convey the spirit, the idea of out of this darkness and death and sadness, something new is going to be born again. So we begin chapter 2 with renewed hopes because it's the time of the barley harvest. Now, what's the time in the barley harvest in our calendar? What holiday is connected with the barley harvest? No, Shavuot. Shavuot is the holiday of the barley harvest. Sukkot is in itself a harvest holiday, but it marks the end of the whole harvest of all the vegetables. After Sukkot, there's no harvest anymore. Shavuot is the beginning of the harvest, and the first thing we harvest is barley. So the beginning of the barley harvest connects us with the idea of Shavuot. This is one of the reasons why we read Megillat Ruth in the holiday of Shavuot, because the rest of the book is going to take place during the same season of Shavuot. So, chapter 2. When Naomi had a kinsman, it says. Kinsman or kinsman?
Kinsman.
Thank you. Naomi had a kinsman. I speak Moabite English. Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side.
Familiar.
There's a Spanish version of the text, by the way, if someone wants. Un pariente, it's in Spanish. It's a relative. Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Now the Megillah is introducing a new male character. So which are the characters so far? We had Elimelech, dead. Machlon, dead. Kilion, dead. Orpah, gone. So we were left with Naomi and Ruth and the people of the town. This buzzing sound of the people of the town. And now we have a new character whose name is Boaz. What's the meaning of the word Boaz?
Bo, doesn't that mean let's go or come?
Boaz, so the B, it's always a connector. But what's the Ein Zayin? Oz means strength. Strength. It's a synonym of koach. Koach. For example, when we sing Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati. Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati. Ma'oz means fortress. So Boaz is the one who has strength. So we can expect something from him.
Yes.
Already the name is telling us something. This is what these women need. They need someone strong, someone who can lift them up from the abyss where they fell, from the depression, for the situation where they are. So Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, so he is a relative of Elimelech, not of Naomi, which is also a little bit odd. You know, when the woman remains widow, her connection to the family of her husband is blurred. It's not a relative of her. It's a relative of her husband who passed away.
Right.
Now we know, because we have read the whole Torah, we know that there are some responsibilities of the family of a person who passes away towards
Son.
this person's wife if she remains with nothing. We will talk about that more next week. Now, so what is the narrator here doing with us? When the text tells us that Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Who is speaking? The narrator is speaking.
Yeah.
To whom? To us, to the readers. And it's giving us some information that who doesn't have? Ruth. No, Naomi has this information because
Right.
Naomi should know who is a relative of her deceased husband. Boaz knows who he is because he is Boaz. The people of the town know who Boaz is and who Naomi is. But Ruth,
Nothing.
this is her first time of Ruth in Bethlehem. She doesn't know who Boaz is. And this is very, very important for what is going to happen now. Ruth has no idea who this man is. Now it says, Ruth the Moabite. Now, didn't we know that Ruth is a Moabite?
They keep reminding us.
Why is the book highlighting this again and again?
She's not one of them.
She's an outsider.
She's not one of them, she's different. I want to use a beautiful word. She's a stranger. Now, let's say that we all read the Torah, okay? And that we are familiar with all the commandments and laws of the Torah. What can we expect from the people of Bethlehem towards Ruth?
She doesn't know anything.
So, are they going to be embracing and welcoming, or they are going to be...
Standoffish.
Okay. So now let's say we really read the Torah. No, I'm just kidding. But I want us to have this idea. The Torah speaks everywhere about loving the stranger, being welcoming, being receptive, being inclusive. Now, one thing is when you have in the Torah a law. And a completely different thing is when that law is put to test in real life. You know, it's very easy to say from a sermon that we should be inclusive and embracing and welcoming. You know, on Shabbat morning from the pulpit, everything is easy. because it's just about speaking and saying. Now, these kind of novels, these narratives, the narratives of the Bible put the law to test. Because in the law, we can see what our people believes in. In the narratives, we can actually check if those laws were observed or not. If everyone is going to push her away and say, you know what, you're a Moabite, go away, we don't like you, we don't want you, then it means everything that was there in the Torah is like in our age. Yeah, it's there in the Torah, but don't take it that seriously. Now, if they are going to behave towards Ruth the way the Torah says we need to treat the strangers, then that means these people really observed the biblical law. Now, the problem is that we have two conflicting opinions in the Torah. Because, as we saw last week, the Torah says that we can never welcome a Moabite. For those who were here last week and for those who were not, I have it here in the additional sources. The book of Deuteronomy is very clear. Not even in 10 generations we should not be welcoming with the Moabites. We should not marry the Moabites. We don't want to have anything to do with the Moabites. On the other hand, the Torah says that in general we should be welcoming to strangers. So what do? We treat a Moabite as a Moabite, or we treat a Moabite as we are supposed to treat any stranger, no matter where is he or she from. So if you turn to the additional sources for this week, just for you to have a taste, I brought a lot of things that we are not going to use. That's the way I plan classes. I plan 3-hour classes and then we only have an hour and a half. But still, if you go to page 11, the pages are numbered here. So if you go to page 11, yeah, it's the last page. You can see, for example, source number 20. No, I'm sorry, source number 15. Here, Exodus 22. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. That's Exodus 22. Then Exodus 23 says, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves to be strangers in the land of Egypt. Then I put that twice, but if you go to source number 18 on the other side of the page, you shall not subvert the rights of the stranger, of the fatherless. You shall not take a widow's garment in pawn. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore do I enjoin you to observe this commandment. And then we'll read the last part of the verse later. So you see, the Torah has a lot of positive attitudes toward the strangers. In fact, there are 3 times when the Torah commands us to love someone. The first one, the one that we say twice a day, and you shall love the Lord your God. Behavta et Adonai Elohecha. The second one, we know it also, love your neighbor as yourself.
Right,
And the other one, love the stranger.
right. But don't marry him.
That's a different story, but still. And it doesn't say that. The Torah doesn't say that.
But don't marry him.
The Torah doesn't say
But
that.
it implies
Our
it.
grandmothers say
That's
that.
what my father
But still, the idea that we shall love the stranger is there in the Torah. So we are going now to put the Torah text to test and to see if Boaz and the rest of the people in Bethlehem are going to fulfill this Torah commandment or not.
Yes, it says right there.
Well, of course. So
And Abraham was the first person who welcomed the strangers. That was his.
Of course, Abraham welcomed the visitors, the strangers, and everywhere in the Torah we are told that we need to be welcoming. But that doesn't mean we are going to be welcome. That's the thing. Because we don't do everything that the Torah says.
Of course.
You know, let's imagine that we write now a story about the Jews and food. It's a gastronomical novel on the Jews. So if you read that book that I'm going to write one day, no, I'm not. If you read that book, you will see what the author of the book believes the Jews ate. Okay? Now you put that next to the Torah and you compare whether the people behave according to the Torah or not. So that's what we're going to do. So it says, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I would like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who may show me kindness. So who has this idea? Ruth. And this is very important because we have said that Ruth is the only one who doesn't know who Boaz is. Because if Naomi had this idea, then we could think that Naomi tried to set her up with Boaz. But the idea was her idea, Ruth's idea. So it says, yes, daughter, go, she replied. So the text calls Ruth the Moabite all the time. But Naomi calls Ruth my daughter. So it says, yes, go, and off she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, and as luck would have it, it was the piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. So I like the way they translate this, the luck. Who knows Hebrew here? Who can read how the book says in Hebrew this idea of luck?
I was thinking the same thing.
No, so it doesn't say mazel. It says, I'm looking for the exact words here, Ba'iker Mikrea. And this is very interesting. Yeah, but it's not luck. That's why I wanted to see the Hebrew. It's not luck. Because luck is mazal. Ba'iker Mikrea. Mikre, in Hebrew means coincidence. Now, Ba'iker means, and it happened. The exact translation would be, and it happened to her coincidence. Now, if something is a coincidence, it's not the coincidence that was prepared for her. Because if it was her coincidence, what we are saying is that it was no coincidence. It's providence. So the text is playing with us so that we can see this tension between things that need to happen and things that happen by accident. And also the idea that nothing that happens by accident or by divine providence will happen if you don't look for it. Because she had a coincidence waiting for her. What's her coincidence? Her divine coincidence. Her accident. What's the accident that we have prepared for her in the book? If she goes out to reap from the fields, she is going to fall in the field of Elimelech, and we have a love story prepared for her. But she needs to take the initiative and say, I will go there. So see how coincidences work in this biblical mind? There is a coincidence, but you need to go out there to look for your coincidence. You know, yes, you can win the lottery, but you need to buy the ticket. If you don't buy the ticket, even if God has prepared for you that you deserve to win the lottery and He wants you to win the lottery, if you never buy the ticket, you will not win the lottery. So we have a big jackpot prepared for Ruth, and it's called Boaz. And there's going to be a beautiful love story that we are going to dive in next week between Ruth and Boaz. And God has that prepared for Ruth. But Ruth has to be willing to go out there to find Boaz. I think this is a very inspiring story for people, for example, who are going through mourning and grief, you know, and they say, well, but what's left for me in life? And sometimes the rabbi or a friend says, well, you will encounter someone, you will come back to something that connects you with life, blah, blah, blah. And they say, well, but it's... Now, if you don't get up and start looking for that, you will never encounter it. That doesn't mean that if you get up and start looking for it, you will encounter it. Many people buy lottery tickets every day and they never win. But I can warranty you that no one has won the lottery without a ticket.
Yeah, but what was it a common practice for women to go and venture out to the fields?
Okay,
Yes.
so this is a very good question. The Torah has, and I brought it in the additional sources, you can look at it at home. The Torah has some agricultural laws that were there to ensure that there was not going to be extremely poor people in the biblical society in which we lived. By extremely poor people, I mean people without their daily food needs covered. Because the Torah also says that poverty will always exist. Literally, the Torah says, "Lo yechdal evyon mikerev haaretz." There will not cease to be poor people in the land where you live. That's a fact. There's always going to be people who are disadvantaged in life, economically, financially disadvantaged. But we will create a system to make sure that they at least have the basics. How did that system work? In an agricultural society, there were 3 mitzvot, leket, shichecha, and pe'ah. Leket means that, so people went to harvest the barley on the field, and you have to imagine as if they had like every field is divided into path, like a swimming pool. How do you call that? Lanes. So every field is divided into lanes, and the workers in the farm go through these lanes and always go forward. And they, with their tools, they start reaping the barley and making bundles. Now, they make one bundle, they leave it here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then another one who works with them puts the bundles together into bigger bundles. Now, if the person who puts them together forgets one, he cannot go back. And that also made the system work efficiently, because if you have to go back all the time to pick someone that you left, you never finish. So you always go forward. If you leave something, you just keep going. Don't worry. It's calculated in the cost. You keep going. Also, if when you're making the bundles, something falls off your hands, also keep going. Focus on your task and keep going. That's called shichecha. It's the second one. And the third one is called pe'ah. Pe'ah means the corners. So the corners of the field were left untouched so that the poor people can go there and gather. So what did the poor people do? They went either to the corners, or when the people advance in their lanes forward, the poor ones were in their back, and every time something fell off them, they were picking everything that fell. And every time they saw that someone left the bundle there because they forgot and they put it into a bigger bundle, they took it for them. Now, what's interesting about this is that the Torah forbids the owner of the field and his workers to go back and take that. Why? Because that doesn't belong to you. And this is a beautiful way that the Torah has to transform charity into tzedakah. What's the difference between charity and tzedakah? If I do charity, I'm being generous, because I'm giving you something that is mine, and since I'm a good person, I'm giving it to you. If I'm doing tzedakah, I'm being righteousness, not generous, because I'm giving you something that it's yours. Actually, it's not yours, it's God's. Everything belongs to Him. So if God gives you in your business $100 of profit, actually, for the Jewish mind, God is not giving you $100 of profit. He's giving you 90. And the other 10, you are the one who has to manage that money, but you are not the owner. It doesn't belong to you. You just have it because God trusts that you are going to give it to the right hands. So Boaz was a field owner, and Ruth was a poor woman. Now, Ruth has it all, has them all. Why? Because when the Torah speaks about these rules, it says that the leftovers of the harvest are there for whom? For the widow, for the orphan, for the stranger, for the poor. Now, she has them all. She's everything. She's a widow, she's a stranger, she's probably an orphan, we know nothing about her parents. She's a woman that also puts her in a disadvantaged layer of society. So she has all rights to go collect that. And it's beautiful because this Torah law makes her being her being a beneficiary of the system something that has dignity. Because she actually goes to work. What does she do every day? She doesn't knock door and ask for coins. She works. She goes to the field and does the same work that the people who work at the field do. She interacts with people and she takes something that according to Torah law belongs to her. So I think that's the beauty of tzedakah. When we do tzedakah, whatever we do is not ours, and whatever people receive, it was always their money or their goods. So they don't have to thank us, because we are actually just a channel through which the tzedakah is channeled. So she came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, and as luck would have it, it was the piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. Now we already know who Boaz is. She still doesn't know, because Naomi never told her go to Boaz's field, so she doesn't know that besides food she's getting something else here. So presently Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He greeted the reapers. "The Lord be with you." And they responded, "The Lord bless you." Look at this. Another thing that the book of Ruth allows us. We can learn from the book of Ruth how did people greet each other in biblical times. Because we have him being quoted as, instead of saying, "Hi, how are you?" he said, "Adonai imachem." And the people answered, "Yevarechecha Adonai." Which, by the way, is the traditional phrase that we use when we are called to the Torah. When someone gives us an aliyah in traditional settings, when we go up to the bima, we greet the Torah reader and say Adonai imachem, the Lord be with us. Like Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom, Adonai imachem, and the people answer Yevarechecha Adonai, God bless you. It's beautiful because they use God's name to actually greet each other. For those of us who hear all the time people being reluctant to use God's name because Hashem and all these. In the days of Ruth, people use the word Adonai to greet each other. As in Spanish we say adios. Dios is God. So we use God as a blessing for people. So, "The Lord be with you," and they responded, "The Lord bless you." Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose girl is that?" Now, of all the people who were there harvesting, he put his eyes on Ruth the Moabite. So he says, "Whose girl is that?" The servant in charge of the reapers replied, "She's a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, this is the workers speaking. She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She has been on her feet ever since she came this morning. She has rested but little in the hut." Boaz said to Ruth, "Listen to me, daughter." Who called Ruth daughter? Naomi. He's speaking Naomi's language. "Listen to me, daughter. Don't go glean in another field." Meaning she was entitled to go to any field in town. He wants to make sure tomorrow she comes back here. We can imagine that the poor people, because they were shy, one day went to one field and the day after they went to another field. Because you don't go to the same charity organization to ask for food every day. You schlep And you have a list. You know, there are 40 synagogues in Aventura. So before you come back to ATJC, you go to Safra, you go to Ventura, and at the end you come back here. But it's true, unfortunately. But he wanted to make sure that tomorrow she comes back to his field. Don't go elsewhere, but stay here close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field, they are reaping, and follow them. I have ordered the men not to molest you. So another thing we know about how life worked there. There were poor women and there were poor men. And there were workers also. And the situation makes it very easy for the workers and the poor men to take advantage of the poor women who were harvesting there. So he says, stick with the girls, and I have instructed the men not to touch you, not to molest you, and when you are thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water that men have drawn. Now water.
That's right too.
All this connects us to many, many biblical stories. I just want to focus on one, which is the story of Rivka. Now, we could be talking also about the story of when Moses meets Zipporah. We could be talking about the story when Jacob meets Rachel. What do all these stories have in common? The idea that someone meets her or his bashert in a place that is connected to life and water, and that there is something that this person does that shows the reader that this is the right person we are looking for to be connected with this other person. Meaning, what do we expect for someone who is going to start dating Ruth? Kindness.
Yes.
Why? Because we know that Ruth was very kind to Naomi.
Right.
Ruth left everything for Naomi. She is the best example of kindness that we have. She left her city, her town, her parents, her family, her future, everything in Moab to go live with her widow mother-in-law in Bethlehem. So she is so good that we expect her to find someone as good as she is. So why do I mention the story of Rivka? The story of Rivka, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, goes to Aram to find, goes to Haran to find a wife for Yitzchak. And when he arrives there, he sits at the well and waits. What is he waiting? The coincidence to happen. Actually, if you go to additional sources, this you will find it in, I put the whole chapter there. Genesis 24 is on page 6. Page 7. Page 7. I'm on verse 12. He said, "O Lord, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune this day, and deal graciously with my master Abraham. Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townsmen come to draw water. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels, let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac." Again, there is a coincidence. He has already decreed. Who is he? God. God already decreed there is going to be a bashert. I want a proof of that. But I want to go look for that. I'm going to take the initiative and go wait for that accident to happen. So he had scarcely finished speaking when Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham, brother of Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The maiden was very beautiful, a virgin who no man had known. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. The servant ran toward her and said, "Please let me sip a little water from your jar. Drink, my lord," blah, blah, blah. And if we jump to verse 23, the last one on page 7, "Pray tell me," he said, "whose daughter are you?" The same thing that Boaz asked. Who's this woman? Okay, so you are very nice. You are beautiful. I like you, but I need to know, who are you? And these this woman is going to answer, I am the daughter of Betuel. And the servant or the worker in Boaz's field is going to answer, this woman is Ruth the Moabite. Now, if you go back to the book of Ruth, to verse 8, Boaz said to Ruth, listen, blah, 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 we've read that. Let's go to verse 10, and we will finish with this verse, with 10 and 11. She prostrated herself with her face to the ground and said to him, why are you so kind as to single me out when I am a foreigner? So now we have, the Torah says that everything is nice towards the foreigner. We should be kind and welcoming and inclusive. Boaz is doing what the Torah says. But Ruth is not expecting Boaz to do what the Torah says. Why? Because Ruth knows that usually people in Bethlehem are not that nice towards strangers and especially Moabites. So it's like she is saying, and this is very common when you see someone in a disadvantaged position, that you try to help and the barrier is being put by the beneficiary of the help. It's not that I don't want to help you, you are not letting me help. She's asking, why do you that to me? His answer, his automatic answer should be yes, because that's what the Jewish men do. That's what we do. We are told to be kind to the stranger. Why are you doing this to me? What else would you expect me to do? What, you want me to push you away? You're asking me to push you away? What am I supposed to do? So he replies, I have been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and came to a people you had not known before. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge. So, she doesn't know who he is, but he knows who she is. So when he is told, he asks, who's this woman? And his answer, this is Ruth. Oh, there's nothing to add. He has heard about Ruth. Everyone in town is speaking about these two ladies. So Ruth doesn't know who Boaz is, but now we know who Boaz is. Naomi knows who Boaz is, and Boaz knows who Ruth is. So the only one who is going to be surprised in this story is Ruth, the moment she learns that she actually has a connection and perhaps a right to marry Boaz or to have something with him. We're going to discuss all that next week. But now, if we see the Ruth's question and Boaz's answer, there's something beautiful there. She says, why are you doing all this if I'm a stranger? And he's saying, I know what you did. Meaning, I don't care where you come from. I care what you do. I care about what you do. It's like, why are you doing this to me if I'm Argentinian? Well, there's more in you besides where do you come from. There's a lot more besides your origin. So, even if you are going to define yourself and to sit in that box of the stranger and believe that no one is going to do good to you because you are a stranger, I'm going to tell you that I treat people the way they deserve, regardless of where do they come from. So I've heard what you did with your mother-in-law, and I'm going to treat you with the same token. And here we have something beautiful. Here we have the idea that if you do good, at the end of the road, you're going to receive good. Perhaps not automatically. She's still a widow. She's still looking for tzedakah food. She's still working on a field. Have you been, we said that barley harvest is Shavuot in Israel. Have you been in Shavuot in Israel? The Hamsim? I mean, it's difficult. It's 100 degrees and dry. She's not having fun here, but she found some light. She found someone who is telling her, forget about where you come from. I'm not asking you if you are a Moabite. When you know that many people, when they go look for welfare or even for medical treatment, they are afraid that if they don't have documents, they are going to be deported because They are needy, and they don't want to look for help because they have this prejudice idea that people are going to denounce them and they're going to be deported. And here we have Boaz saying, I'm not going to ask you where you come from. I don't care. You're a Moabite? Fine. You're a human being. And you're a good human being. And I will treat you as so, as a good human being. I'm going to pay you with the same token that you paid Naomi. So he says, may the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge. So that's the end of our study for today. I believe we have covered a lot, but just keep in mind that Ruth still doesn't know who this man is. Eva.
He's a stranger. More or less guess what age these people are.
So we don't know what age these people were. We don't know what age these people were. We can imagine that Ruth is, I'm going to spoil you the end of the story. Ruth is still able to have kids.
Well, we know that. She's the grandmother of David.
Of course. So she's young. She's young. No, I didn't say she was a lesbian.
Jackie was waiting for that. No, Jackie, sorry.
No. Okay, I want to clarify this. And with this we finish. Rosie says, did you say that she was a lesbian with Naomi? No. What I said is, the book of Ruth is the most important love story between two women that we have in the Bible. That doesn't mean it's an erotic kind of love. It can be friendship. It can be yes, she married Boaz. Yeah, but that's the end of the story. But now, even though they were not lesbians, and there's not any single verse of the book of Ruth that implies any kind of intimate contact between Ruth and Naomi, what I did say is, for women who love other women and are trying to find within the Bible a text with which they can identify, the book of Ruth will be a great option because they will find their love between two women. But that's a matter of how we read the book and not of what happened there. They were not lesbians, but some lesbians identify with the book because it's a love story between two women, as some gay men identify with the love story between King David and Jonathan. And that doesn't mean they were gays. There is some people who believe that, but besides that, even if they were not gays, that doesn't mean gays cannot identify with that story more than with others. The same way that a father of twins can identify with Isaac more than with any other story because Isaac had twins. So some people can find some stories that resonate within their soul and their spirituality more than others, and there are many articles written by lesbian women who find in the love story between Ruth and Naomi an inspiration.
But Ruth converted at the end.
Again, there was no conversion. Ruth did not convert because there was no conversion. But Ruth became part of our people. The problem is with the word conversion. There was no ritual in order to become part of our people.
Her son considered Jewish.
Absolutely. Not only that her son is considered Jewish, the son is the